The ceasefire in northern Syria negotiated by the U.S. with Turkey expired today. Kurdish military officials tell the U.S. they have left the area as Turkey threatens to resume its military offensive. Katherine Johnson reports.
In the final hours of the ceasefire in northern Syria, Russian President Vladimir Putin emerged as a mediator, welcoming Turkey's President Erdogan to Sochi for negotiations. Cementing his power in the region, Putin announced Russia and Turkey will take joint control over Syrian territory that had been held by the Kurds. The deal calls for the two countries to push the Kurdish militia about 20 miles from the Turkish border and then jointly patrol that land as a safe zone. Since President Trump pulled U.S. troops from the area, the Kurds, once a U.S. ally, have reached out to the Syrian government for protection. Russia is Syria's main ally and stepped in to fill the vacuum. President Trump's controversial decision to leave Syria has been widely condemned by both Democrats and Republicans, and even some of his strongest supporters are pushing him to end the withdrawal.
I hope the administration is trying to mitigate the damage done by the decision to withdraw from eastern Syria all the U.S. troops.
On a visit to Saudi Arabia, Defense Secretary Mark Esper said the troops will head to Iraq until the next steps are decided.
The aim isn't to stay in Iraq interminably. The aim is to pour soldiers out and eventually get them back home.
Putin's intervention has helped his ally, the Syrian government, to maintain power. And President Bashar al-Assad flaunted it with a visit to the troops, where he vowed to eventually expel Turkish forces and reunite Syrian territory. Katherine Johnson, CBS News, Washington.
Let's bring in Kim Olson. She's a retired United States Air Force colonel and one of the first female pilots for the Air Force. She is running as a Democratic candidate for Texas's 24th congressional district. Colonel, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Elaine. Thank you for having me.
So you served in Iraq when George W. Bush was commander-in-chief and have experience working with America's Kurdish allies. Were you surprised by their reaction when U.S. troops left the region yesterday?
I think, like most Americans, we were very disappointed. And in our district, we are worried about an administration that lacks the understanding of foreign policy and what happens when you pull troops out, create a vacuum in a region that then gets filled, as you just reported, by Russia and Turkey. If we want influence in that region, we have to stay and at least get a seat at the table. And what we did is we abrogated our presence within that region, leaving it to now, as you just said, Putin and the Turkish president.
On that point, long term, how do you see the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria affecting the balance of power in the region as a whole? What do you think this means for America's national security interests?
Well, I think what it means for the nation as a whole is we are giving up our seat at the table when it comes to trying to influence peace within that region. Like I said, when you create a vacuum, somebody's going to fill it, and you may not like who does that. It also allows Iranian influence within that region. We have what's called the Shia crest, which occurs, and it goes from Tehran all the way to the Mediterranean. And if the United States military or its political allies or even allies within the region don't have a chance by us supporting them to have a say within their own future, like we just did to the Kurds who were absolutely essential to us in northern Iraq, I find it very, very disappointing. And now, who's going to trust America if we leave like we did?
Some Democratic presidential candidates, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, have said they do not believe American troops should be in Syria, though they still would have pulled them out differently than President Trump. Do you believe U.S. troops should still be in the Middle East?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I will just say, as a mother, I have a son who wears a uniform, and of course, I want our troops to be in places where we have a strategic plan, we have a policy, but what we created was a dangerous situation when we absolutely withdrew the troops without any kind of policy thought of the repercussion of that. And this is why I think you need veterans and those that have served in these kinds of regions to sit in places of power like Congress and like the Senate, and that's what voters, I think, in TX24 are looking for. Reasonable leaders with experience, and especially those of us that have been on the tip of the spear, need to come back and understand how you wield that sword, which is, of course, the military might of America.
I want to turn to your background. As we mentioned, you are running as a Democratic candidate in Texas there, but I want to focus on your military background. While you served in Iraq, you were accused of abusing your position to profit from a security firm that you helped establish. You eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges and you were reprimanded. What do you say to people who may be concerned about this part of your career?
Well, what I'd say to him is that my decisions in a combat zone were to save American lives. And faced with the same exact circumstances, I would make those decisions again. Because at the end of the day, you as a commander are charged with the care and feeding of the troops. And because some bureaucrats got their feathers ruffled, that's just too bad. Because my job is to save American lives, and I would do it again, Elaine.
All right, you are running in Texas's 24th congressional district in the suburbs between Fort Worth and Dallas. It's a district President Trump won in 2016, but Beto O'Rourke won as a Democratic Senate candidate in 2018. Why do you believe you can win there?
Well, I can win there because when I ran for Ag Commissioner, which I did last cycle, I garnered 3.8 million votes, the most votes any Democratic woman had gotten in the history of Texas. And matter of fact, came within 1 point of taking that district. So we will work very hard. We put boots on the ground. We've been doing the things that you do as you try to run for office. And I think that Texas is not only ready for not just a congresswoman in TX24, she's ready to tip blue, and I'm going to help bring that to bear.
You still have a Democratic primary battle where there are several candidates. One is Jan McDowell, who gave retiring Republican Congressman Kenny Marchant his toughest ever challenge in 2018, losing only by 3%. Why are you the best candidate to go up against a Republican nominee?
Because I only lost by 2%. I actually got more votes in that district than the congressional candidate did. And again, a part of that is getting your name out, registering voters, and we are ready to tip Texas blue. And it's not just that district. You know, Texas needs 9 Texas House seats in order for our Texas House to turn blue, and 6 of those 9 sit in and around this district. So you have to have the capacity in 2020, when we don't have straight ticket voting anymore, to reach down and pull those down ballots up so that we can have Texas's House go blue, and then we can have a say when we redistrict our entire state.
Well, you're the only veteran among the Democratic candidates, but what sets you apart ideologically from your primary opponents?
Well, nothing really ideologically. We're Democrats. We want what's best for the American people and for those that we represent in our district. I have an aerospace background. If those of your viewers that don't know where TX24 is, you take DFW Airport, you blow a rectangle around it. It's an aerospace district. It also has defense contracts within it. We have Bell Helicopter, Lockheed. We have Everett, which is a drone manufacturing, but we're also a logistics hub. And so we push, DFW Airport pushes more product out than any other airport in the United States of America, to the tune of about $264 billion in revenue for our district. So it is a very important strategic and exporting hub. And so I think the folks in TX24, like folks all around the country, want reasonable leaders. And what they see in this administration is someone who lacks experience in foreign policy, doesn't understand the impacts of what happens in a trade war to our economy. And I think America and Texans are ready for a change.
What's your position on the impeachment inquiry?
I think, like most Americans, feel that you ought to get all the facts, that we have a process in place, that Congress was set up to be the checks and the balances of the administrative or the executive branch. And I think it's important that Congress does its job, which it is doing. And when the facts bear out, they will bring it and they will decide whether there are articles of impeachment available for this president.
Kim Olson. Kim, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Elaine. It was a pleasure.